as a managerial and professional consultant with over 40 years' experience. Currently, he is an adjunct professor at Fresno, California at Alliant University, California School of Organizational Studies, as well as president and owner of Anders & Associates, a national consulting firm. As an organizational development practitioner, Dr. Anders has particular expertise in consulting with top executives on problems of administration and organization, strategic direction, helping create productive environments and multicultural diverse workforces, conflict resolution, and team-building efforts. He received his PhD in psychology from William Lyon University and an MBA from the University of Chicago. In addition, he has received professional certification in consulting, systems analysis, and mental health. He is a graduate of the Advanced Organization and Systems Development Program and the Intensive Postgraduate Training Program of the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland. Dr. Anders, welcome. Thank you for being with us today and sharing your knowledge, experience, and wisdom of organization development. Our first question posed to you today comes from Melanie Moss.
Hello, Dr. Anders. We know you have a little bit of Native American heritage. Will you tell us a little bit about how you received the name Open Eagle and some of the earlier influences in your life?
Yes, Melanie, I'd be glad to. My maternal grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee. She was born and raised in the North Carolina and lived there, and I spent many of my summers there when I was a little boy. And she had a magic about her that has followed me all my life. She brought me into the world. She was a midwife among the native tribe, and she brought me into the world. And she said I came into the world screeching like an eagle and waving my arms. Later, when I was about 4 or 5, I'd run to greet people with open arms. Thus, she named me Open Eagle. I was very proud of that name because eagles are the highest form of life to Native Americans next to people. My grandmother taught me so many things. I used to tag along behind her when she'd go out in the morning to milk the cows. And to entertain me and keep me quiet, I had a little tin pail that she'd put milk in that I would drink while I was waiting there while she was milking. And to entertain me, she used to say, Open Eagle, this morning we're going to sing songs so the sun will come up. We sang songs, and the sun came up. And on mornings where there were big, dark clouds, and the wind was blowing, I'd say, Grandmother, let's sing songs for the sun to come up. She'd say, Open Eagle, this morning we were going to dance, so it rained. We danced, and you know, it rained. It rained often. I began to feel very powerful. Like a little boy, I felt like I was in charge of the elements. And those experiences really helped me a great deal. My grandmother taught me to be proud of my Native American blood, but not to be egotistical ever. So she said, in order to be whole, you have to feel good about yourself, and you have to feel good about all tribes. You have to be interconnected with people and the universe, the woods, the rivers, the sky, the birds like the eagle, animals. I knew all animals by name. And so with this early training, I think it had a great deal to do with my later getting into OD many years later, because it gave me a solid base of feeling like I was important and the world is important, and that together we could make a lot of things happen. So my grandmother was a great inspiration for me, and she has been still with me in spirit many times. I talk with her about those early days, and I owe a lot of what has happened to me to her.
Dr. Anders, we know you also have done work with the National Training Laboratories. Will you tell us a little about your experience with NTL, your learning, and how you were inspired by this organization?
Sure, Nancy, I'll be glad to. I came out of World War II in 1946. Incidentally, that was the year that of the Big Bang with where I think a lot of change happened in OD. We'll talk about that later. But I was a manager who was command and control kind of person. I learned that in the Army. And I was very good with that. So I moved along rather rapidly in management circles because that's what they wanted, what they expected. But somewhere along the line, I got out of line and got too much of power and control. I had a number of people reporting to me, and it was in the mid-'60s. I had heard something about sensitivity training. I didn't really have an idea what it was really about. I went to a 3-week lab, and it was something. I tell you, of course, I went in controlling it naturally. We had 12 mostly executives from other worlds there. And of course, when the trainer said this meeting will be different from any others that you've had because there will be no agenda, there will be no procedures, no goals, no procedures, no leadership. I'm sure we'll all learn a lot together, and that's all he said. And he said, so we had to begin to talk. I began to take over the meeting and say, well, I stood up and I said, well, let's get a plan going here. I had a flip chart. And I started, I drew a little organization chart, started people's name in boxes. Anyhow, they all gave me a hard time because I kept trying day after day to get something going. I couldn't. And I was very, very frustrated because this just didn't seem right. But I met a man there who had, he was part of the lab, and he changed my life. This guy had a lot to do with change. His name was Jack Gibb. And Jack Gibb was one of the early pioneers of NTL. He took me in this is not during the T group, but I made a great connection with him. By the way, with the T group, I learned a great deal about me, a great deal. I got a lot of feedback, and I took it in. And I was miserable. I was angry. I'd gone through a gamut of all emotions, but I survived. I went back to the organization and began to change, try to change the organization. I convinced the company to set up a learning center by Holiday Inn, and we marketed OD products to all kinds of organizations, did all kinds of things within. Even in those days, we were doing things like, team building, but like self-sufficient units. Some of that kind of stuff didn't come along to much later. And I set up a program for executives. We called it, the organization, by the way, I created was called Managing Change. Managing Change. And this was really a miniature T group. And we didn't call it that, of course. It's where managers could come together and really level with each other. We created a safe place where people could get feedback and talk to one another about who they were, their pains, their families, their life, their jobs, but even the company. And what made this successful, this program lasted some 25 years. Sherry came into the organization years later, and this program was still going. And what made it last was they had a protective umbrella over this organization, over this session. And I had an agreement with the organization that no one from corporate would come over there during this week. And no one would ask them. They wanted to know, are you evaluating these people? No. Well, how is this going? I said, ask them, because we have a trust with them. The trust is that we will not give any feedback about anything you say or do this week. So they never had a place like that before nor since. Now, Jack Gibb, I want to talk about him briefly. He was an inspiration in my life. He stayed in my life several years. In fact, I earned my PhD under the auspices of Jack Gibb. He was my tutor. And Jack and I would entertain questions like, it's over a period of time, like, what would you look like if you were healed? I know you've had a lot of scars, Larry. I know you well. I know about your early Native American life and how tough it was. I know you came through the Great Depression. You went through World War II, and I know you've been buffeted about a great deal. What would it look like if you were healed? What would that be like? Other questions like, what would I be like if I was whole? What if I dealt with my parts that were not together? If I dealt with my shadow, what would it look like if I was whole? What would you look like if you trusted people and they trusted you? If you were free and open? If you walked your talk? If you were an authentic person? And he said, he was very big on this, and what would it be like if you found your passionate path on the planet? The path that leads you to where you'd be happy in a career, in a profession, where you could march to the beat of your own drum, however faint or far the music. I believe that was from Thoreau, the best I recall. And he said you could probably, if you worked hard at it, you could learn to sing the song that God taught you how to sing. This will give you just a little flavor of Jack Gibb. I used to get letters from him when I was in Chicago in the high-rise, and the letter was always addressed to the magnificent Larry Anders, and underneath he'd say, better known as Open Eagle. And the postman, I got familiar with him, he one day said, where do you get these letters? I noticed these letters. I said, they're coming for a friend of mine. He said, are you magnificent? I said, not really, but when I get this, I am. I feel magnificent every time I get one of these. So Jack had a great influence on my life. And I'm touched even thinking about him now, after all these years. But that was NTL, my early experience. And we'll talk more about NTL when we get into OD, because NTL was a fountain of OD, where OD was created in many ways. And everything that happened in OD can go back to Jack Gibb and some of those early pioneers I met at NTL.
In your view, what major events have shaped organizational development and their effect on your career development?
Nancy, there are literally thousands of events in OD, but I picked a few out here, and I wrote some notes down for myself that influenced me the most. And I want to begin with, in 1946, with what's known as the Intergroup Relations Conference that was run by Kurt Lewin, Ken Benny, Lee Bradford, and Ron Lippett. Anyway, Kurt Lewin, one of the great blessings that we have in this country is that Kurt Lewin escaped from Nazi Germany in the 30s. And being Jewish, he probably wouldn't have made it if he'd stayed there. And he had done many things in our country before this event. But this was, to me, this is the greatest event for change maybe in the world, in my world. Where they're in Connecticut, they brought together a group of people who couldn't get along with one another. And they wanted to find ways they could work better together and learn from one another. And so these gentlemen, Lewin, Benny, Bradford, and Lippett, created a conference there. They brought in some scientists to observe these people in the daytime. And at night, like all scientific investigations, they would review what happened in the day and talk about it. Well, one night they were in there talking about what happened in the day with these 50-something people. And two women overheard them. They were passing by, and they went in and said, wait a minute, says, you're talking about me, and that wasn't really what happened. I would like to tell you what really happened. Well, this disturbed the researchers. They just thought, my goodness, this would destroy the whole scientific method. And Kurt Lewin said, I think we're onto something here. Let them stay. So they started giving feedback to each other. And the next night, the place was, everybody came in to talk about together. And this was the beginning of action research. research in action. This is the beginning of so many things that happen in OD. And I want to read from you the Open Eagle story of this event, if I could. This is in the speech I gave, a story I told to the National Training Lab's annual meeting one morning, one year. And this is just part of it. It said, over the mist of time, many versions of the story have been told. However, this version is according to the elders. In the 7th month of the year with new beginnings, a very unique and never before heard of event took place. The people who were being observed by the little professor and the three wise men, the little professor was Kurt Lewin, and the three wise men were Benny, Bradford, and Lippitt. That's what I called them in my story. And the great thinkers, that's the researchers with sharp ears and with sharp eyes and big ears, became mutual participants into the inquiry of their own behavior. This open dialogue and observed consequences by everyone was like a bolt of lightning in the dark night, followed by the crash of thunder. A new and powerful kind of communication was being born, a shift in conversation to which the words flowed and flowed until they became the subject of the same conversation. And the legend goes on to record that all those who sat full circle and reached out for new learnings in the 7th month during the year of new beginnings observed with great interest the backfeed, the comparing of notes, the loud voices, and later the softer eyes that made small mountains from big ones. This new medicine that helped the people's voices flow naturally to the surface for greater interaction and understanding became known 12 months later at the Academy of Gold as a group with a large T up front. That was the beginning of T groups. And the next year, NTL was formed in the year 1947, and the first T group that was ever run in this country was run there in Bethel, Maine, in the year 1947. That was the beginning of NTL, and it goes straight back to what these men were doing the year before.
Dr. Anders, what major events stood out for you in OD over time?
I'd like to take a few of the decades and maybe talk about one or two events or happenings that affected me directly and that impressed me and that helped me in many ways. In the 1950s, a book came out entitled The Human Side of Enterprise, written by Douglas McGregor. And that book had a tremendous effect on me because it's about leadership styles. He compared Theory X and Theory Y management. You may have read this book. But McGregor, that book, I bought 20 copies of that book, and I gave them to every manager that I knew to read that book, because to me it was a breakthrough. It was almost a new beginning in terms of how do you look at leadership styles and how you really deal with people, because that was the beginning of delegating and participative management. In the 50s, another thing that stood out for me was Dick Eckhardt, who was a big leader in OD, and Doug McGregor did some work in General Mills, and they tried to change the total culture of that organization over time. And that's where the name OD first began, Organization Development. They called that process OD development. That was in the 50s. 1960s, let's go on to the 1960s just briefly. So a tremendous change was going on in the 60s. Everything that's ever nailed down seemed to be coming loose. During the 60s, the OD series of books, Addison Wesley series, came out. And these books were the guide to OD. And many others have come out since. And in 1960s, the OD Network was formed with Warner Burke, Shel Davis, and Herb Shepard. All these three men I knew well and worked with over time and seen them in many places. In the 1970s, there's a paradigm shift in OD. We moved from local to national, from national to international, and finally to global. So OD spread throughout the world in the 70s. And another big thing for me was organizational transitions and transformation by Dick Beckhart. We got into organizational change in a very big way, where we're trying to change the total culture to transitions and transformation. And total quality management came in very big in the 70s. Total quality management. You probably have read about that, knew about that. Let's move on and talk briefly about the 80s. I got a few notes here. By the way, that's when I left the corporation in 1980 to form my own consulting firm called Anders & Associates. Sherry worked with me a great deal on that. So did many other colleagues. And here's where OD began to move in different directions. In the 80s, we moved into strategic planning and mergers and acquisition, downsizing, computerization, business practices, business process reengineering. All of those great events happened in the 80s, where OD was beginning to move away from all the soft stuff and get more of the hard stuff, as they said in those days. But we were getting into what was really needed, and that was what was needed in the 80s, because a different kind of change was going on. And oftentimes they brought in OD consultants, especially after downsizing, to help take care of the people who were wounded, to take care of the people who were there. Sometimes the people who survived were in worse shape than the people who lost their jobs, because they felt guilty and all. So we had to do a great deal of training and education with those people. Also, in the 1980s, appreciative inquiry came in too. We've covered that in our organization studies here. Dialogue came in to create I use dialogue a lot in my work. That became a big thing. And large group interventions with Marv Wise boards, as many different large group intervention technologies came into place. In the 90s, process facilitation became important, and managing paradoxes, where we realized that everything was not a problem to be solved, was the dilemma or paradox or polarity to be managed. Executive coaching came in big in the 90s, and I got into executive coaching, still do a great deal of it. Corporate universities to market and to teach OD came into being. They increased dramatically in the 90s. Positions ranging from consultant to vice president level were very common in OD in this time. And university master and doctoral programs came into existence. And you're in one here at Alliant International University now. So that pretty much covers some of the major events of OD that affected me directly.
Dr. Anders, how do you personally view the future of organizational development? And do you have any insight that you would like to share with future OD practitioners?
Thanks, Melanie. When I hear people say that OD is old and stumbling around and on the way out, I say baloney. I think OD will fly like an eagle in the years ahead. I really do. I'm more optimistic about it than I ever have been. And I've been in OD now a long, long time. And I've seen a lot of good things happen. But we have a saying in Native America, and I think it's, maybe a lot of people say this, what goes around comes around. I think the world is confused right now. And to me, we've lost our way again. Sort of like back in the 30s and 40s when those brilliant social scientists came to our aid. Guys like Binney and Lippitt and certainly Kurt Lewin. I sense a new consciousness emerging. I really do. And going back to my grandmother and her philosophy, it's even more obvious to me that we need an interconnectedness to the universe more than ever in this global setting that we have. You know, the very big issues in the world are everyone's business. whether they realize it or not. And we need interconnectedness, not like the machines, but like nature. And for me, OD technology is a road we've got to travel to make that happen. To me, that's the only thing, it's the most important thing we can do in the future. So it isn't dying for me, it's getting its second wind, so to speak. I really feel that strongly. And here are some trends I see where OD will excel, and those of us who are in it. One thing is proven beyond all doubt: rationally designed organizations cannot overcome the chaotic world. I think I've got a lot of proof of that. I can show you tons of proof of it. For me, 70% of the problem could be solved with faith, hope, and just human decency. But 30% of it is what is taught in organizations and in, unfortunately, major universities. We ignore the 70%. We teach about the rational world. And we're not doing enough with this other 70%, in my opinion. In the global mindset, OD has acute ability to encounter and overcome cross-cultural complexity in accomplishing global work. We've got the stuff to do that with. We're trained that way. And most of us are that way personally, in our personal training. I think one thing we could do is lead change more wisely, help people embrace change. You've heard me talk about this, and uncertainty and complexity. And change, chaos is an integral part of transformation and creativity. I think we've got to accept that more and more. And I think OD is a technology to lead us into dealing with ambiguity. As I've said to you many times, ambiguity is where opportunity lives. And uncertainty is how we feel about that ambiguity. And I'm in charge of how I feel. I feel certain or uncertain depending on myself. And ambiguity is opportunity. And I think OD it's a technology to take advantage of opportunity that comes out of ambiguity. I think we need to use processes that enhance strategic decision-making systems, looking at the whole group in the room, as we've talked about so often, as systems, so we get ownership and commitment. What's wrong in the world right now is I think we're moving away from that. This is our problem. We can solve it together. I think the world is at a point where efficiency won't cut it. It has to be excellence. And you can get efficiency out of just doing what people tell you. But you can't get excellence out of that. You get excellence out of my commitment. And I'm in charge of my commitment. Only I can give it. You can't beg, borrow, or steal it from me. I have to give it. And the only way I'm going to give it is to get involved. So I say that interest, input, and involvement, that's where OD tends to live. That's where you get excellence. I think, bottom line, the use of self with our values, skills, and continuous learning as the world turns and changes. We've got to turn and change with it. And I really believe that the OD technology and our commitment to increasing the wholeness of the earth, to increase people's worth on the earth, and to increase effectiveness in organizations. In other words, it's a both-and things for us. We're interested in improving the quality of life and increasing the effectiveness of organizations. You can't really separate one without the other. As my grandmother used to say, all change is composed of two things: science and magic. Science is a technology, and what you know about systems. The magic is people. Without that magic, there's no way we can bring on change and deal with where the world is going today. So that's how I see the future. I see it rather bright.
Dr. Anders, thank you for allowing us this privilege today. And as we wrap up here, will you share with us two of your favorite Larryisms?
Well, Beth, I'd like to share one of them with you at least, and then I want to go from there and say a few other things. You know, in meetings, oftentimes meeting's over and we get up and run, you see people run out like a bunch of wild turkeys. Well, I always say, let's leave the meeting like an eagle, you know. So openings, beginnings and endings are really big with the Native Americans. I began with my grandmother because I thought I could have a real good beginning. Being born and dying are important. So the ending I want to do, I want to try to get into myself and do that. But the aneurysm I have is don't leave meetings like a bunch of wild turkeys. Most people, as soon as it's over, they rush out. Pause, reflect, and end it like an eagle. End it gracefully and with power. So I want to try to end this meeting with some power and live up to Open Eagle's name. You know, last night, and this is true, last night I live near Woodward Park. I went out and I walked around Woodward Park. It's pretty late at night, an hour or so, reflecting on today. And I said, with all these wonderful people who came before us, these early pioneers, these social scientists, psychologists, psychiatrists, business people, people who came from all walks of life, learned people, educated people, who brought on major change in their lifetime. What was different? What was unique about them? What were the common grounds? We know about their education and their past, but what was common for them? And I got to thinking, and I said, well, it seemed to me like these, every time I went to an NTL meeting or an ODNet meeting and met some of these founders and researchers and had the chance to relate with them, I always felt peaceful. I felt safe. And I felt excited. I felt all those things. In other words, I felt at home. Excuse me. One thing I think they had was what I call innocence. They were innocent. They would play like, it was a childlike innocence. You know, they would sometimes sing and dance and play, and they would entertain silly ideas, really silly ideas. They would, which kind of amazed me in a way. I was going for some intellectuals, you know, who were going to lecture like all the people who's lectured to me most of my life, people who were supposed to know something. But they had fun. And it reminded me a lot of when I go to Chicago and be with Sherry's granddaughter named Peyton. She's on the way to 3. And I get with her and we play and laugh and sing and scream and yell. And I know her mother says to me, Larry, you got to use your inside voice. You can use outside voice when you go out. But we cut up inside the house. And I think a lot of it's a form of innocence. Like I am open to possibilities. Another thing about them that always seemed true of every group I ever met, they had a high level of curiosity. You know, in our world, our society, you always get rewarded for what you know, and you get punished for what you don't know. So I think what we do sometimes with children, we teach them to be right. Things are right or wrong. And so I've heard little kids arguing about, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, you're not right, I'm right. I've heard big arguments around this. And what we do when we do that is we get their curiosity out of them. We kind of engineer it out of them. And when I went to these things with Bethel, Maine, every places, I found that these people were not so interested in telling me what they know. They were more interested in what I knew. And I was amazed at that. They wanted to know what I knew. They got outside of the box, not to tell me what they knew, but what do you know? They were very curious about the world and what was going on. I think they'd gotten beyond the need to know and to express their knowledge to other people. They wanted to know about me. And that absolutely amazed, curiosity amazed me. And one thing I think I learned from these experiences was that when I hold something very dear to me and hold it so close, sometimes I close out my knowledge, my information, my technology, whatever. I close out all other possibilities of people coming into me. And so I think what these people proved to me, they wanted to get out of the box and hear what other people thought and what they felt and what they believed. And the other thing they had in common was compassion. And the word calm means to be together with. The root of it means together with. And passion is pain. So these people were always with my pain and their pain. We shared our pain together. And that was always good for me because I was in a lot of pain in those early days. Like what I mentioned about Jack Gibb, the questions he asked me. He helped me get through my pain and through some breakthrough learning to get through it. And these people knew that all change is pain. Good or bad, it's pain. It's pain because all change doesn't start with beginnings. It begins with endings. And endings are painful. Endings have loss, great loss, and we don't like to lose things. They have a great loss to them. And I think these people understood that in spades. They really know what to do with that. And so I'm thinking those seem to be the differences. Maybe to break through again as we need to. Maybe we need to go back. Maybe to our innocence and back to our curiosity and back to our compassion. I know the world says we are touchy-feely. But you know, touchy-feely is the hard stuff. It's not the soft stuff. And I think the executives who are leading the world know it's hard. They don't even get near it. So they stay in the soft stuff. They stay with the number crunching and all those kind of things. They're important. Don't get me wrong. It's a both-and thing. We need both. But I believe the world is getting back to where we need to break through again like they did back in the 40s and 50s and 60s with people like the ones I just described here. And so that's where I'm at with that. And I'd like to, acknowledging those people, I would like to read something to you from, Sherry and I were looking at Side E3, first year comp. You'll be going through this before long. And I came across one from a student. Some comments I got out of her comp review, and I want to read it to you. It just touched me deeply. It says, I respect, resonate with, and deeply admire a quality of OD practitioners and professionals in this community. That quality is acknowledgement and honoring of the legacy of the Pathfinders. There is respect for the elders, if not in age, in the fact that they created a new intervention or approach based on the insight of those who came before. It is an atmosphere of honorable intentions and a foundation skill that comes with rich confidence and healthy inner life and application of the first ethical guideline to act with integrity, be authentic and true to myself. I'm proud of being a novice, a knitter in this profession, and how it will continue to stretch my imagination and expand my skills. I witnessed that integrity and self-discovery actively evident in my instructors, the guest speakers we have met through our classes, the authors and conference presenters and participants. And also I want to acknowledge you for doing this for me. It's seldom that people will decide they want something and pay the way to get it. I mean, this is done at your expense. I really appreciate each one of you for doing this. And I appreciate the university coming over to do this. I really have enjoyed being with you. It's been a big pleasure. And I wish you well in your continued studies at OD. We've got a great future ahead of us. Thank you.